The remote Scottish highlands stretched endlessly before Sarah Chen as she clutched the rusty key, staring at the primitive stone structure that was supposedly her inheritance. Bills piled up at home, her daughter needed surgery, and this crumbling hut seemed like a cruel joke from a universe that had already taken everything from her. But Sarah wasn't just any desperate mother. She was a former archaeological linguist who'd walked away from her career after a scandal destroyed her reputation. The moment she stepped inside and saw the carved symbols on the walls, symbols that predated known human civilization by thousands of years, her blood ran cold. These weren't just ancient markings, they were coordinates, mathematical equations, star charts, and beneath a hidden stone slab in the floor lay a cellar filled with artifacts, gold, and documents worth $265 million, evidence that someone had been covering up humanity's true origins for centuries. But as headlights appeared on the distant mountain road, Sarah realized she wasn't the only one who knew about this place. Who else was coming for the treasure? And what were they willing to do to keep these secrets buried? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she quickly photographed the cellar's contents with her phone's dying battery. The golden artifacts gleamed in her flashlight beam, ornate tablets covered in the same impossible script she'd seen upstairs, ceremonial tools that belonged in no known archaeological record, and leather-bound documents that should have crumbled to dust millennia ago, yet remained perfectly preserved. Her hands trembled as she lifted one of the tablets. The weight was wrong, too light for solid gold, yet harder than any metal she'd encountered. The symbols etched into its surface seemed to shift in the flickering light, and for a terrifying moment she could almost read them. The knowledge felt like ice water flooding her veins. The sound of car doors slamming outside snapped her back to reality. Sarah grabbed the smallest tablet and shoved it into her jacket pocket, then carefully replaced the stone slab. Her archaeological training kicked in as she swept away any trace of her presence, erasing footprints in the ancient dust with her sleeve. Heavy footsteps crunched on gravel outside, male voices speaking in low, urgent tones she couldn't quite make out through the thick stone walls. She killed her flashlight and pressed herself against the wall beside the doorway, barely breathing. Through a gap in the ancient stones, she watched three figures approach the hut. The leader was tall and angular, moving with military precision despite his expensive suit. Behind him, two men in dark clothing flanked the entrance like soldiers. "The Chen woman arrived 2 hours ago," the leader said into a satellite phone. "Yes, sir. We'll handle the situation cleanly." Sarah's blood turned to ice. They knew her name. They'd been watching her. "Check everything," the man continued. "If she found the lower chamber, we have a problem. The consortium's been protecting this site for 80 years. We're not about to let some disgraced academic blow our cover now." The consortium. Sarah's mind raced. She'd heard whispers of that name in academic circles, a shadow organization that supposedly controlled archaeological discoveries, deciding which truths the world was allowed to know. She'd dismissed it as conspiracy nonsense when her career imploded 5 years ago after she'd challenged the accepted timeline of human evolution. Now, hiding in a stone hut with impossible artifacts burning a hole in her pocket, those conspiracy theories felt terrifyingly real. The men entered the hut, their flashlight beams sweeping across the walls. Sarah pressed deeper into the shadows, grateful for the building's primitive construction that created dozens of blind spots and alcoves. "Sir, you need to see this," one of the men called out. "The symbols, they're definitely active. Impossible. The site's been dormant since 1943. The leader's voice carried a note of concern that chilled Sarah more than his earlier threats. "Readings are spiking. Someone with the bloodline has been here." Bloodline? Sarah's mind reeled. What did genetics have to do with ancient stone carvings? Through the gap, she watched the leader pull out a device that looked like a cross between a Geiger counter and a smartphone. It emitted a low, steady beeping that increased in frequency as he moved toward the hidden cellar entrance. "The slab's been moved recently," he announced grimly. "Call in the cleanup team and put out an alert on Sarah Chen. She's gone from academic curiosity to active threat." The tablet in Sarah's pocket suddenly grew warm against her chest. The metal seemed to pulse with her heartbeat, and the carved symbols began to glow with a faint blue light visible even through her jacket fabric. The device in the leader's hand erupted in rapid beeping. "She's here," he whispered. The morning light filtered through the grimy windows of Sarah's studio apartment, illuminating the stack of unpaid bills on her kitchen table. She rubbed her eyes, still gritty from another sleepless night, and checked her phone. 3 missed calls from the daycare center about late pickup fees, 2 text messages from her landlord about next month's rent, and 1 voicemail from a number she didn't recognize. "Miss Chen, this is Margaret Whitmore from Whitmore and Associates. I'm calling regarding the estate of your great-aunt, Evelyn Blackwood. Please return my call at your earliest convenience. It's quite urgent." Sarah frowned, replaying the message twice. Evelyn Blackwood. She'd never heard the name before, and she thought she knew all her living relatives, which amounted to practically no one since her parents died in that car accident 5 years ago. Her finger hovered over the callback button. Probably some mistake, but with her bank account sitting at negative $47, even a mistake was worth investigating. "Whitmore and Associates, how may I help you? This is Sarah Chen. I received a call about an Evelyn Blackwood." "Oh yes, Miss Chen. Please hold while I transfer you to Mrs. Whitmore." Classical music played for 30 seconds before a crisp voice came on the line. "Miss Chen, thank you for calling back. I've been trying to locate you for several weeks. I'm handling the estate of your great-aunt, Evelyn Blackwood. She passed away 3 months ago. I'm sorry, but there must be some mistake. I don't have a great-aunt named Evelyn." "I assure you there's no mistake. Miss Blackwood was your maternal grandmother's sister. She left very specific instructions about locating you, along with detailed family records. You are her sole heir." Sarah sank into her second-hand kitchen chair, mind reeling. Her mother had rarely spoken about her family, always changing the subject when Sarah asked about grandparents or relatives. What exactly does that mean? Sole heir? It means you've inherited her property, a rather unusual dwelling located in the Northumberland countryside. Miss Blackwood was quite adamant that it should pass to you specifically, should anything happen to her. Property. Sarah's heart began to race. Property meant money, potentially. Maybe enough to catch up on rent, pay off her credit cards, give her daughter Emma a stable home instead of this cramped apartment where the heating barely worked. Yes, though I should mention it's quite remote. No modern amenities, I'm afraid. Just an old stone structure on 40 acres of woodland. Miss Blackwood lived there alone for decades. Quite the recluse by all accounts. Sarah's mind was already calculating. Even a run-down property had to be worth something. She could sell it, maybe put a down payment on a proper apartment in a better school district for Emma. What do I need to do? I'll need you to come in to sign the papers, and then you'll need to visit the property. Miss Blackwood insisted in her will that you spend at least 1 night there before making any decisions about its future. Rather eccentric, but legally binding. When would be convenient for you? As soon as possible, Sarah said without hesitation. 2 hours later, she sat in Margaret Whitmore's polished office, staring at documents that made everything real. Evelyn Blackwood had indeed been her great-aunt, and the property was now legally hers. The lawyer handed her an old brass key along with a hand-drawn map. "The nearest village is Haywick, about 6 miles from the property. I should warn you, Miss Chen, the dwelling is quite primitive. No electricity, no running water. Miss Blackwood preferred it that way. And the locals—" Mrs. Whitmore paused, adjusting her glasses. "Well, they tell rather strange stories about the place. Superstitious nonsense, I'm sure, but you should be prepared for some odd reactions if you mention where you're staying." "What kind of stories?" "Oh, the usual rural folklore. Claims that it's ancient, that strange lights appear at night. Some even insist it's cursed. Miss Blackwood encouraged these rumors, I believe, kept visitors away. Mrs. Whitmore's expression grew serious. There is one legitimate concern, however. Several individuals have contacted my office asking about the property. Quite insistent, actually. Academic types, they claimed, interested in historical sites. I told them nothing, of course, but you should be aware that others seem to know about your inheritance. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. What kind of academic types? Archaeologists, anthropologists, even someone claiming to be from the British Museum. They all seemed remarkably well informed about the property's existence, which is odd considering how secretive Miss Blackwood was about it. Sarah folded the map carefully and pocketed the key. Whatever was waiting for her in Northumberland, it was her only shot at changing her life. She'd arranged for Emma to stay with her friend Lisa for the weekend, drive up north, and figure out exactly what Evelyn Blackwood had left her. She had no idea that others were already watching, waiting, and planning to claim her inheritance for themselves. The morning light filtering through the hut's single window revealed details Sarah had missed in yesterday's fading daylight. What she'd initially taken for crude stonework showed remarkable precision, each rock fitted with mathematical exactness, creating walls that had withstood millennia without mortar. Running her fingers along the surface, she felt subtle tool marks, evidence of craftsmanship that seemed impossibly advanced for what the lawyer claimed was a Paleolithic structure. Emma bounced around the small space, her 8-year-old imagination transforming the ancient dwelling into a fairy castle. "Mom, look! There's a funny door in the floor." Sarah's breath caught. Near the back wall, partially hidden under centuries of accumulated dirt and debris, lay what appeared to be a stone slab with worn grooves around its edges. She knelt beside it, brushing away the grime with trembling fingers. The slab was definitely artificial, too perfectly rectangular to be natural. "Stay back, sweetheart," Sarah murmured, though her own curiosity burned fierce. She pressed against one edge of the stone, and it shifted slightly. Her heart hammered as she realized the slab was designed to move. It took 20 minutes of careful maneuvering to shift the heavy stone, enough to reveal a dark opening beneath. Cool air wafted up, carrying scents of earth and something else, something metallic that made her nose wrinkle. Sarah fumbled for her phone's flashlight and aimed it into the depths. A ladder of sorts descended into blackness. The rungs appeared to be carved from the same stone as the walls, worn smooth by countless hands over unimaginable spans of time. But it was what lay beyond the ladder that stole her breath entirely. The weak light glinted off surfaces that shouldn't exist. Metal. Lots of it. "Emma, I need you to wait outside for a few minutes, okay? Play by the car where I can see you. But Mom, please, baby, just for a little while." Once Emma was safely outside, Sarah began her descent. The ladder held her weight easily, each rung solid despite their obvious age. The underground chamber was larger than the hut above, carved directly from the bedrock with the same impossible precision, but it was the chamber's contents that made her legs weak. Gold. Stacks upon stacks of gold bars lined the walls, their surfaces dulled by age but unmistakably precious. Ancient coins spilled from rotted leather bags, their faces bearing symbols she didn't recognize. Jewelry of designs both primitive and sophisticated gleamed in her phone's light. But strangest of all were the modern elements scattered throughout the ancient treasure. Currency from various countries, some dating back decades, some recent enough to make her wonder who else knew about this place. Sarah picked up one of the gold bars, surprised by its weight. Unlike modern bullion, this bore no maker's marks or government stamps. Instead, intricate symbols were etched into its surface, symbols that seemed to shift and dance in her flickering light. A leather satchel in the corner caught her attention. Unlike the obviously ancient containers, this one appeared relatively new. Inside, she found documents wrapped in oilcloth. Her hands shook as she unfolded papers covered in typescript and handwriting. The first document was a letter addressed to the next guardian, dated just 3 years ago. "If you're reading this, then I am dead. and the responsibility has passed to you. The treasure you've discovered is only part of the truth. These artifacts represent evidence of an advanced human civilization that existed long before recorded history, evidence that certain people will do anything to suppress. The gold can sustain you, but use it carefully. They monitor precious metals transactions, and too much activity will draw attention. The real value lies in the other items, the tools, the star charts, the written records. They prove that our ancestors possessed knowledge that challenges everything we believe about human development. Trust no one in authority. The conspiracy to hide our true history reaches into governments, universities, and museums worldwide. They killed your great-uncle Thomas when he tried to publish his findings. They killed his research partner, Dr. Elena Vasquez. They will kill you too if they discover what you know. But someone must preserve this truth for future generations. That burden now falls to you. Guard it with your life. Literally, the letter was signed Margaret Whitmore, apparently Sarah's mysterious great-aunt. Sarah's mind reeled. The treasure alone represented millions, maybe tens of millions in value. But according to the letter, it also represented something far more dangerous. Evidence of an ancient conspiracy that had already cost lives. Footsteps echoed from above. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Emma was supposed to be playing by the car, not inside the hut. "Emma?" she called softly. No response. The footsteps moved with purpose, definitely adult-sized. Someone else was in the hut, someone who knew exactly where to look because the sound of the stone slab being moved came clearly through the chamber's ceiling. Sarah quickly stuffed several gold coins and the letter into her jacket pockets, then switched off her phone's light. In the absolute darkness, she pressed herself against the chamber wall and tried to control her breathing. A powerful flashlight beam pierced the opening above. "She's down there," a man's voice said quietly. "Bring the girl." Sarah's fingers trembled as she lifted the heavy wooden trapdoor, its ancient hinges groaning in protest. The musty air that rushed up from the darkness below carried scents of earth and something else, something metallic that made her stomach clench. She fumbled for her phone's flashlight, the weak beam barely penetrating the black void beneath her feet. "Just a quick look," she whispered to herself, though her voice sounded hollow in the empty hut. "Then I'll call someone, the authorities, an archaeologist, someone who knows what they're doing." The wooden ladder descended into shadows, its rungs worn smooth by countless hands over what must have been centuries. Sarah tested each step carefully, her heart hammering against her ribs. The cellar was deeper than she'd expected, at least 10 feet down, and as she reached the bottom, her phone's light revealed stone walls that seemed to extend beyond the hut's footprint above. But it was what lay scattered across the earthen floor that made her breath catch in her throat. Gold coins glinted in the pale light, some scattered individually, others spilled from rotted leather pouches. Ancient jewelry, necklaces, bracelets, rings adorned with stones she couldn't identify, lay tangled together like forgotten treasure from a fairy tale. But these weren't the polished artifacts she might have expected from a museum display. These pieces were raw, primitive, yet somehow more beautiful for their crude craftsmanship. Sarah knelt beside the nearest pile, hardly daring to breathe. Her fingers hovered over a thick gold torque, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to writhe in the shifting light. The workmanship was unlike anything she'd seen in textbooks or museums. It was older, much older. A sound from above made her freeze. Footsteps on the stone floor of the hut. Her phone's light died as she squeezed it in panic, plunging the cellar into absolute darkness. She pressed herself against the cold stone wall, trying to control her ragged breathing as heavy boots moved across the floor above her head. "She's been here recently," a man's voice said, low and gravelly. "Coffee still warm on the counter." "Check the back rooms," another voice replied. This one sharper, more educated. The readings from the metal detector were strongest near the far wall. Sarah's mind raced. Metal detector? How did they know about this place? And more importantly, how did they know about what lay beneath it? The footsteps moved closer to where she remembered the trapdoor being. In her haste to descend, had she left it open? She couldn't remember, and the darkness made it impossible to look up and check. "Jesus Christ!" the gravelly voice breathed. "Marcus, get over here. Now." "What is it?" "The floor. There's an opening." Sarah bit down on her knuckle to keep from making a sound. Her phone was still clutched in her other hand, and she silently switched it to airplane mode, praying the screen wouldn't suddenly light up with a notification. "This is it," the educated voice, Marcus, said with barely contained excitement. "After all these years, we've finally found it. Boss is going to want to know immediately." "No," Marcus's voice turned sharp. "We handle this ourselves first. Make sure it's really what we think it is. You know what happened to the last team that got his hopes up." The conversation sent ice through Sarah's veins. These weren't casual treasure hunters or curious locals. They knew exactly what they were looking for, and they clearly worked for someone dangerous enough to make experienced men nervous. A beam of light suddenly blazed down from above, much brighter than her phone's flashlight. Sarah pressed herself deeper into the shadows, grateful for the cellar's apparent size. The light swept across the opposite wall, illuminating more scattered treasure and what looked like carved symbols etched directly into the stone. "My God," Marcus whispered. "Look at those markings. They're identical to the ones in the Prague site. Is that good or bad for us? It means we're looking at a fortune that would make kings weep, but more than that." Marcus's voice dropped so low Sarah had to strain to hear. "It means the stories are true. All of them." The light moved closer to her hiding spot, and Sarah realized she needed to move or risk discovery. Slowly, carefully, she began to edge along the wall, her fingers trailing against the rough stone for guidance. Her foot struck something metallic, sending coins skittering across the earthen floor. The light beam froze, then swung directly toward her corner of the cellar. What was that? Sarah held her breath, pressing herself so hard against the wall that the stone bit into her back through her jacket. The silence stretched endlessly, broken only by the sound of her pulse thundering in her ears. Then, mercifully, one of the men above shifted his weight, and a piece of debris from the ceiling clattered down into the cellar. "Just the old building settling," Marcus said finally. "Place is probably ready to collapse." But his light lingered for several more heart-stopping seconds before finally moving away. The cellar door creaked as Sarah descended the rough-hewn stone steps, her phone's flashlight cutting through the darkness. The air grew colder with each step, carrying an earthy scent mixed with something else, something metallic that made her stomach turn. At the bottom, she swept the light across the space and gasped. Ancient symbols covered every inch of the walls, carved deep into the stone and filled with what looked like dried pigment. But these weren't crude cave paintings. The precision was extraordinary, the detail impossibly fine for something that Professor Blackwood claimed was 40,000 years old. Spirals interconnected with geometric patterns she'd never seen before, punctuated by what appeared to be star maps. Her light fell on a series of metal containers stacked against the far wall. Modern containers. Her heart raced as she approached them, noting the serial numbers and military-style latches. Someone had been here recently. The first container opened with a sharp click. Sarah's breath caught. Stacks of currency from dozens of countries filled the space. Euros, dollars, pounds, yen. More money than she'd ever seen in her lifetime. The second container held the same, and the third— "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice echoing in the stone chamber. This was enough to pay for Emma's medical bills, to get them out of their cramped apartment, to give her daughter the life she deserved. But as she reached for one of the bills, her flashlight caught something that made her freeze. A fourth container sat partially hidden behind the others, and this one was different, older. The metal was tarnished, and strange symbols were etched into its surface, symbols that matched those on the walls. Inside, nestled in what appeared to be specially molded foam, lay objects that defied explanation. Crystalline devices that seemed to pulse with their own inner light, despite the absence of any obvious power source. metallic fragments that reflected her flashlight beam in impossible ways, creating patterns of light that hurt to look at directly. Sarah lifted one of the crystal objects, surprised by its warmth. The moment her skin made contact, the symbols on the walls began to glow with a soft, blue-green luminescence. She nearly dropped the device, stumbling backward as the entire chamber filled with an otherworldly light. The walls seemed to come alive. The symbols shifted and moved, rearranging themselves into new patterns, and in that ethereal glow, she could see them, figures moving within the stone itself, as if the walls were windows into the past. She watched, transfixed, as tall, elongated beings worked alongside shorter, more familiar human forms. They were building something together, their movements coordinated and purposeful. The taller beings wore garments that seemed to shimmer like liquid metal, while the humans were draped in animal skins. But they weren't primitive. These early humans moved with intelligence and skill, using tools that shouldn't have existed for millennia. The vision shifted. Now she saw the same chamber she stood in, but it was different, larger somehow, and filled with the crystal devices. The tall beings were departing, placing objects into containers, while the humans watched with expressions of profound sadness. One of the beings approached a human woman and placed a crystal device in her hands, speaking words Sarah couldn't hear but somehow understood. "Keep safe. We return." The glow faded, and Sarah found herself alone in the darkness once more, the crystal device still warm in her trembling hands. Her phone had died at some point during the vision, leaving her in absolute blackness. Fighting panic, she felt her way to the stairs and climbed toward the dim light filtering from above. Her mind reeled with what she'd witnessed. It was impossible, yet she'd seen it with her own eyes. The implications were staggering. Contact between early humans and another species, technology that predated known civilization by tens of thousands of years. As she emerged from the cellar, sunlight streaming through the stone hut's small window, she heard the sound of car engines approaching, multiple vehicles moving fast. Sarah's blood went cold. She rushed to the window and peered out to see 3 black SUVs racing up the narrow dirt road, kicking up clouds of dust. She shoved the crystal device into her jacket pocket and grabbed her purse, her mind racing. The money, she had to go back for the money, but as the vehicles drew closer, she realized there wasn't time. Whoever these people were, they weren't here to chat about property inheritance. Sarah burst through the hut's door and ran for the tree line, her heart pounding. Behind her, she heard car doors slamming and voices shouting orders. Professional voices, military voices. "Secure the perimeter. I want this entire area locked down." She crashed through the undergrowth, branches tearing at her clothes as she fought her way deeper into the forest. The crystal device in her pocket seemed to pulse against her ribs, warm and alive. Whatever it was, whatever those visions meant, people were willing to kill for it. And now she was the only thing standing between them and secrets that could change everything humanity thought it knew about itself. Sarah's hands trembled as she descended the narrow stone steps, the LED flashlight casting dancing shadows on the ancient walls. The air grew colder with each step, carrying a musty scent that spoke of millennia undisturbed. Behind her, Marcus's steady breathing provided the only comfort in the suffocating darkness. "Jesus," Marcus whispered as they reached the bottom. "How deep does this go?" The cellar stretched beyond their light's reach, carved directly from bedrock. Sarah swept the beam across the walls, revealing intricate symbols etched deep into the stone. Not crude scratches, but sophisticated markings that seemed to tell a story. Some looked almost familiar, like distant cousins of letters she knew. "Look at this," she breathed, approaching the nearest wall. The symbols were arranged in careful rows, each character precisely carved. This isn't random, it's organized. Like writing. Marcus joined her, his archaeological training taking over despite his earlier reluctance. "If this is what I think it is, Sarah, we're looking at something that shouldn't exist. Homo sapiens weren't supposed to have written language this early, not even close." A metallic glint caught Sarah's eye deeper in the chamber. She moved toward it, her heart pounding as the light revealed wooden chests bound with corroded metal straps. 3 of them, each the size of a small coffin, arranged in a deliberate triangle around what appeared to be a stone altar. "The money," she whispered, then louder. "Marcus, this has to be where Mrs. Whitmore hid whatever she took from my great-aunt." The first chest's lock had long since rusted away. Sarah lifted the heavy lid, and both of them gasped. Stacks of currency filled the container, not just dollars but euros, pounds, yen, all wrapped in plastic and organized with methodical precision. More money than Sarah had ever seen in one place, but it was the second chest that made her blood run cold. Modern documents filled this one, organized in manila folders. Sarah grabbed the topmost file with shaking hands. The letterhead read Meridian Archaeological Foundation, and the date was from just 3 months ago. Subject: Site Suppression Protocol, she read aloud. Per Directive 7 Alpha, all evidence of advanced cognition predating 40,000 BCE must be contained or eliminated. Local authorities have been briefed on the cover story. Structural instability requiring immediate demolition. Marcus snatched the document from her hands, his face pale in the flashlight's glow. "This is impossible. I know these people. The Meridian Foundation funds half the archaeological research in Europe. They're not some shadow organization. They're what, Marcus?" Sarah's voice carried a sharp edge. "Because this says they've been systematically destroying sites like this one for decades." She grabbed another folder. Inside were photographs, dozens of them showing stone structures similar to her hut, along with carved symbols that matched the ones surrounding them now. Each photo was stamped with red letters, eliminated. "They've been covering this up," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "All of it. Every site that proves humans were more advanced than we thought. They've been destroying evidence." Marcus was reading over her shoulder now, his breathing becoming more labored. "Sarah, look at the signature on these orders." She looked. The name at the bottom made her stomach drop. Dr. Helena Voss, Chief Archaeological Advisor. "I know her," Marcus said quietly. "She gave the keynote at last year's European Archaeological Congress. She's one of the most respected researchers in the field." Sarah opened the third chest with growing dread. Inside, she found what looked like a journal wrapped in oiled leather, along with more modern documents. The journal's first page bore an inscription in faded ink: "Property of Dr. Eleanor Whitmore, Cambridge University, 1952. My great-aunt was an archaeologist," Sarah breathed. "She discovered this place decades ago." As she flipped through the pages, her great-aunt's careful handwriting revealed the magnitude of her discovery. Carbon dating results, translation attempts of the wall symbols, detailed measurements of the structure above, and on the final page, a note that made Sarah's hands shake. "They came today, offered money to keep quiet. When I refused, they made threats. I'm hiding everything here. The evidence, their money, all of it. Someone needs to know the truth. We're not who we think we are. Our history is a lie." "Sarah," Marcus's voice was urgent now. "We need to leave. Now." "What? Why?" "Listen." She held her breath and heard it, the distant sound of vehicles approaching, multiple engines growing louder. "They found us," Marcus said, already moving toward the stairs. "Whoever killed Mrs. Whitmore, whoever's been covering this up, they're here." Sarah grabbed the journal and as many documents as she could carry, her mind racing. The money meant nothing now. What mattered were the photographs, the evidence of a conspiracy that had been operating for generations, systematically erasing humanity's true history. The sound of car doors slamming echoed from above as they reached the stairs. Sarah clicked off the flashlight, plunging them into absolute darkness. "Is there another way out?" Marcus whispered. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to remember the hut's layout, desperately hoping her great-aunt had been clever enough to plan for this moment. Sarah's hands trembled as she held the ancient tablet, its surface rough beneath her fingertips. The symbols carved into the stone seemed to pulse in the flickering candlelight, and for a moment she could have sworn they were moving. She blinked hard, attributing the illusion to exhaustion and stress. Dr. Marcus Webb leaned closer, his breath warm against her shoulder. "These markings predate any known writing system by thousands of years," he whispered, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile moment. "If this is authentic, it could revolutionize everything we know about early human development." Emma stood guard near the cellar entrance, her eyes darting between the stone steps and the shadows above. The sound of distant footsteps had ceased 20 minutes ago, but the silence felt more ominous than the earlier intrusion. Whoever had been prowling around the hut hadn't given up. They were simply being more careful. "Mom, we need to get out of here," Emma said, her voice tight with anxiety. "Those people, whoever they are, they're not going to stop looking." Sarah nodded but couldn't tear her gaze from the tablet. The symbols seemed familiar somehow, tugging at something deep in her memory. She'd seen similar markings before, but where? The answer danced just beyond her reach, frustratingly elusive. Webb carefully lifted another artifact from the collection, a small, intricately carved bone tool that looked far too sophisticated for its supposed age. "Sarah, your great-aunt wasn't just an eccentric collector. She was sitting on the archaeological discovery of the century. These items suggest that early humans possessed advanced cognitive abilities much earlier than we previously believed." A soft scraping sound from above made them all freeze. Emma immediately extinguished 2 of the candles, plunging the cellar into deeper shadow. They waited, hearts pounding, as footsteps moved across the floor above their heads. Slow, deliberate steps that suggested someone was methodically searching the hut. Sarah clutched the tablet closer, her mind racing. The papers she'd found in Aunt Millicent's desk had mentioned the Watchers and warned about keeping the secret safe. But what secret? What made these ancient artifacts so dangerous that people would kill for them? The footsteps stopped directly above them. Through the wooden planks they could hear someone moving objects around, clearly searching for something. A chair scraped across the floor, followed by the sound of drawers being yanked open. Webb reached into his jacket and pulled out his cell phone, but the screen showed no signal bars. The isolation that had once made this place feel peaceful now felt like a trap. Sarah thought of her car parked outside, their only means of escape, and wondered if whoever was upstairs had already disabled it. A new sound made her blood run cold, the distinct creak of the loose floorboard near the fireplace. She'd stepped on it dozens of times during her exploration of the hut. Whoever was above them was getting closer to discovering the hidden entrance. Emma moved silently to her mother's side and whispered directly into her ear, "There's another way out. I found it while you 2 were examining the artifacts. Behind that stack of crates, there's a tunnel." Sarah followed her daughter's pointing finger to the far corner of the cellar, where wooden crates had been stacked against what she'd assumed was a solid wall. Now she could see the faint outline of an opening behind them. The footsteps above grew more urgent, and they heard the sound of furniture being dragged across the floor. Their intruder was definitely searching for the cellar entrance now. Webb quickly began gathering the most significant artifacts, stuffing them into a leather satchel he'd brought. "We can't leave these behind," he breathed. "If they fall into the wrong hands—" Sarah helped him pack the items, including the tablet that seemed to burn with importance in her hands. As they worked, fragments of her great-aunt's journal entries flashed through her mind. Millicent had written about guardians and bloodlines and the responsibility that came with knowledge. At the time, Sarah had dismissed it as the ramblings of an eccentric old woman. Now she was beginning to understand that her great-aunt had been deadly serious. A loud crash from above sent them scrambling toward Emma's discovered exit. The wooden crates were heavier than they looked, but adrenaline gave them strength. Behind the makeshift barrier, a narrow stone passage stretched into darkness. As they squeezed through the opening, Sarah heard the unmistakable sound of the cellar entrance being discovered. Heavy boots pounded down the stone steps they'd descended just hours earlier. Voices echoed in the chamber they'd just abandoned, at least 2 people speaking in urgent, clipped tones. The tunnel was cramped and musty, forcing them to move in single file through the suffocating darkness. Sarah clutched both the precious tablet and her daughter's hand, while Webb brought up the rear with his satchel of artifacts. Behind them, angry voices grew louder as their pursuers realized they'd found an empty cellar and a secret passage. The chase was far from over. Sarah's hands trembled as she descended the wooden ladder into the cellar, her flashlight beam dancing across the stone walls. The musty air grew thicker with each step, carrying scents of earth and something else, something ancient that made her skin crawl. Behind her, Marcus followed, his breathing shallow and quick. "Jesus," he whispered, as his feet touched the packed dirt floor. "How old did you say this place was?" 40,000 years, give or take." Sarah swept the light across the chamber, revealing carved symbols etched deep into the rock. They weren't like anything she'd seen in textbooks. These were sophisticated, deliberate, almost mathematical in their precision. But that's not what's important right now. She moved toward the far wall where her earlier exploration had revealed a loose stone. Her fingers found the edges, and with Marcus's help, they pried it free. The cavity behind contained a metal box, corroded but intact. Sarah's pulse hammered as she lifted it out. "That's it?" Marcus peered over her shoulder. "That little thing is worth millions?" Sarah set the box on the ground and worked at the rusted latch. "It's not the box, Marcus. It's what's inside." The lid opened with a grinding squeal, revealing layers of oiled cloth wrapped around several objects. She carefully unwrapped the first bundle. The bone fragment fit perfectly in her palm, yellowed with age but preserved in remarkable detail. Carved into its surface were more of the intricate symbols, but these were different, more complex, as if they represented advanced concepts rather than simple pictographs. "I don't understand," Marcus said, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "It's just old bones and DNA evidence." Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. "These bones contain genetic material that proves modern humans possessed advanced cognitive abilities tens of thousands of years earlier than we thought possible. The mathematical principles carved here, the astronomical calculations, they predate known civilization by millennia." She unwrapped a second object, a small stone tablet covered in symbols that seemed to shimmer in the flashlight beam. "This isn't just archaeological evidence, Marcus. This rewrites everything we know about human evolution, about the timeline of intellectual development. Do you understand what that means?" Marcus shook his head, still not grasping the magnitude. "It means every textbook is wrong. Every established theory about human development, every timeline we've built our understanding on, all of it crumbles. Universities would have to restructure entire departments. Governments that have built national identities around being cradles of civilization would lose that status overnight." A sound from above made them both freeze. Footsteps on the wooden floor of the hut, slow and deliberate. "Sarah?" a voice called down. Pleasant, professional. "I know you're down there. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Crane. I work for the Whitmore Foundation. We really need to talk." Sarah felt ice in her veins. She quickly rewrapped the artifacts and closed the box. Marcus grabbed her arm, his eyes wide with panic. "There's another way out," she whispered, pointing to a narrow passage she'd noticed earlier. "That leads to the hillside behind the hut." "Sarah, please," the voice continued. "You have something that doesn't belong to you, something that could cause a great deal of harm if it falls into the wrong hands. We're here to help." "Right," Sarah muttered, tucking the box under her arm. "That's why they burned down my apartment." She led Marcus toward the passage, but stopped when she heard more footsteps above. Multiple people now, moving with military precision. "The Foundation has invested considerable resources in maintaining historical stability," Dr. Crane called down. "What you found, it's dangerous, not just to you, but to the fabric of human understanding. Some knowledge is too disruptive to exist." Sarah bit back a bitter laugh. "Too disruptive for whom?" "For everyone. Imagine the chaos if people discovered their entire understanding of human progress was fundamentally wrong. Religious institutions, educational systems, national governments, all built on carefully maintained historical narratives. What you have down there could topple civilizations. The passage was barely wide enough for Sarah's shoulders. She squeezed through, feeling rough stone scrape against her jacket. Behind her, Marcus struggled to follow, his larger frame making the journey more difficult. "Your great-aunt understood this," Dr. Crane continued, her voice growing fainter as they moved deeper into the tunnel. "She kept the secret for 70 years. She knew what would happen if it got out." They emerged into pale moonlight on the hillside behind the hut. Sarah's car was parked 50 yards away, but between them and escape stood two figures in dark clothing, their faces obscured by night vision goggles. "Going somewhere?" one of them asked. Sarah clutched the box tighter and stepped back toward the tunnel entrance, but Marcus grabbed her shoulder. "There's nowhere to go," he whispered. "They've got us surrounded." The figures began moving toward them, and Sarah realized with crystal clarity that her great-aunt hadn't died of natural causes. She'd been silenced, and now they'd come for the secret she'd protected for 7 decades. The satellite phone screen cast an eerie blue glow in the darkness of the hidden chamber as Sarah watched Dr. Chen's face appear through the static. Behind him, she could make out what looked like a laboratory, sterile and white. "Sarah, thank God you're safe." Chen's voice crackled through the poor connection. "I've been trying to reach you for hours. Where exactly are you?" "In the cellar beneath the hut." "Marcus, what is this place? What did my great-aunt discover?" Sarah angled the phone so Chen could see the ancient paintings covering the walls around her. Chen's expression grew grave as he studied the images. "Those symbols, they're consistent with what we've been finding at other sites. Sarah, I need you to listen very carefully. Your great-aunt Margaret wasn't just an archaeologist. She was part of a covert research group investigating anomalous human remains found across multiple continents." The connection flickered, and for a moment Chen's voice became distorted. When it cleared, his words sent chills through Sarah's bones. "The remains show evidence of technological advancement that shouldn't have existed 40,000 years ago. Tools made from materials we can barely synthesize today. But that's not the most disturbing part." Sarah pressed closer to the phone, her heart hammering. "What do you mean?" "The genetic analysis shows these weren't entirely humans, Sarah. The DNA contains sequences we've never encountered before. Some of my colleagues believe we're looking at evidence of genetic manipulation, but by whom, we don't know." A sound from somewhere above made Sarah freeze. Footsteps, moving carefully across the floor of the hut. She cupped her hand around the phone and whispered, "Marcus, someone's here." "Listen to me." Chen's voice became urgent. "The foundation that's been funding this research, they're not what they seem. They've been suppressing discoveries, silencing researchers. Your great-aunt tried to expose them before she died." The footsteps overhead grew louder, more purposeful. Sarah could hear muffled voices now, at least 2 people moving through the hut. Her mind raced as she remembered the car she'd seen following her earlier that day. "The money in the cases," she whispered into the phone. "It's connected to this, isn't it?" Margaret was gathering resources to continue her research independently. She discovered something in that chamber that terrified her and excited her. "Sarah, you need to get out of there now." The voices above became clearer. Sarah could make out words, basement, files, and something that made her blood run cold. Loose ends. She quickly gathered the satellite phone and the documents she'd been studying, stuffing them into her backpack along with one of the smaller cases of money. The larger cases would have to stay behind for now. "Marcus, I have to go. They've found me." "Sarah, wait. There's something else. The genetic sequences we found. They're not extinct. We've detected similar markers in modern populations, but they're dormant. Whatever your great-aunt discovered, it's still relevant today." The connection began to break up as Sarah heard the sound of the hidden entrance being manipulated from above. Someone had figured out how to access the cellar. Find Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell at the University of Edinburgh. Chen's voice faded in and out. She has the rest of the research. Trust no one from the Meridian Foundation. They'll... The line went dead as the chamber was suddenly flooded with harsh LED light. Sarah spun around to see two figures descending into the cellar, a woman in an expensive coat and a man whose bulk suggested military training. "Miss Mitchell," the woman called out, her voice echoing off the ancient walls. "I'm Dr. Vanessa Sterling from the Meridian Foundation. I believe you have something that belongs to us." Sarah backed deeper into the chamber, her hand instinctively moving to the backpack's straps. "I don't know what you're talking about." Sterling's laugh was cold. "Your great-aunt was a brilliant but misguided woman. She thought she could take our research and use it for her own purposes. We simply can't allow that kind of intellectual property theft." The large man moved to block the exit while Sterling approached slowly, her eyes taking in the painted walls with obvious familiarity. "These symbols represent something far more important than you could possibly understand, a discovery that could reshape not just archaeology, but the entire future of human development." Sarah's mind raced through possible escape routes, but the chamber had only one entrance. If this research is so important, why hide it? Why kill people for it? "Because some knowledge is too dangerous for the general public," Sterling replied matter-of-factly. "Imagine what would happen if people learned that human evolution wasn't entirely natural, that we've been guided, manipulated for millennia. Society would collapse overnight." As Sterling reached into her coat, Sarah noticed something carved into the wall behind her, a symbol that looked remarkably like the one on the satellite phone. Without fully understanding why, she pressed her hand against it. The ancient chamber suddenly filled with a low, thrumming sound that seemed to come from the very stones themselves. The sound of approaching vehicles shattered the morning silence. Sarah pressed herself against the stone wall, watching through the narrow window as 3 black SUVs carved dusty trails up the mountain path. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she recognized the lead vehicle, the same one from the university parking lot. "Emma, wake up," she whispered urgently, shaking her daughter's shoulder. Emma stirred from her makeshift bed on the floor, instantly alert despite her grogginess. "Are they back?" Emma asked, already reaching for her shoes. Sarah nodded grimly. Through the window, she could see armed figures emerging from the vehicles, their movements coordinated and purposeful. Dr. Voss stepped out of the lead SUV, his silver hair gleaming in the early sunlight as he surveyed the hut with predatory satisfaction. "The tunnel," Sarah said, grabbing their hastily packed bag. They had spent the night preparing for this possibility, memorizing the escape route Marcus had shown them through the underground passages. They slipped into the cellar just as heavy footsteps reached the hut's entrance. Sarah's hands trembled as she activated the hidden panel, the ancient stone grinding softly as it revealed the narrow tunnel entrance. The sound of splintering wood echoed from above. They were breaking down the door. Emma squeezed through the opening first, Sarah close behind. The tunnel was barely wide enough for an adult, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees through the suffocating darkness. Behind them, she could hear muffled shouts and the crash of overturned furniture as their pursuers ransacked the hut. The tunnel stretched endlessly ahead, carved from living rock by hands that had been dust for millennia. Sarah's flashlight beam danced across strange markings on the walls, symbols that seemed to writhe in the shifting light. The air grew thicker as they descended, heavy with the weight of secrets buried beneath tons of stone. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber. Marcus was waiting for them, his face grim in the flashlight's glow. Beside him stood Dr. Chen, her usually composed demeanor cracked with exhaustion and fear. "They found us faster than expected," Marcus said quietly. "Someone's been feeding them information." Dr. Chen stepped forward, her eyes bright with desperate urgency. "Sarah, we need to talk about what your great-aunt really discovered. What's hidden in that cellar isn't just valuable, it's revolutionary and incredibly dangerous." Sarah helped Emma to her feet, brushing dust from her daughter's clothes. "I'm listening. The artifacts aren't just ancient. They're evidence of something that shouldn't exist. Your great-aunt found proof of advanced human civilization dating back over 200,000 years. Technology, knowledge, capabilities that completely contradict everything we know about human development." Marcus nodded grimly. "The implications are staggering. If this information becomes public, it would upend archaeology, anthropology, even our understanding of human evolution itself." "But why kill for it?" Emma asked, surprising the adults with her directness. Dr. Chen exchanged a meaningful look with Marcus before answering. "Because certain powerful groups have built their influence on controlling historical narratives. This discovery threatens foundations they've spent centuries establishing. Religious institutions, academic hierarchies, even governmental power structures. All of it could crumble if humanity learns its true origins." A distant rumbling echoed through the chamber. Their pursuers had found the tunnel entrance. Marcus motioned them deeper into the cave system, his movements urgent but controlled. "There's more," Dr. Chen continued as they moved. "The technology your great-aunt discovered isn't just advanced for its time. Some of it surpasses what we're capable of today. Energy storage methods, materials science, even what appears to be early genetic manipulation techniques." Sarah's mind reeled. "That's impossible." "So we thought, but the evidence is undeniable. And if Dr. Voss and his backers get their hands on it..." Dr. Chen's voice trailed off ominously. They reached another branching point in the tunnel system. Marcus paused, consulting a hand-drawn map by flashlight. The sound of pursuit was growing closer, echoing off the stone walls like approaching thunder. "This way leads to the old mining road," Marcus said, indicating a passage that sloped sharply upward. "But Sarah, you need to understand, running won't solve this. As long as those artifacts exist, you and Emma will never be safe." "What are you suggesting?" Marcus's eyes met hers in the dim light. "Your great-aunt left you more than just a hut and a fortune. She left you a choice. Those artifacts could change the world, but only if they survived long enough to be studied properly." The sound of voices echoed from behind them, much closer now. Dr. Voss's distinctive accent carried through the stone corridors, barking orders to his team. "We have to move," Marcus urged. "But think about what I've said. Some secrets are worth dying for, and some are worth living for." Sarah grabbed Emma's hand and plunged into the upward tunnel, her great-aunt's legacy weighing on her shoulders like the mountain of stone above their heads. Sarah's hands trembled as she held the carbon dating report, the laboratory's letterhead stark against the white paper. 47,000 years. The number seemed impossible, defying everything she thought she knew about human history and the modest stone hut that had changed her life forever. Dr. Martinez leaned forward across his cluttered desk, his eyes bright with scientific fervor. "Sarah, do you understand what this means? If these artifacts are authentic, and every test we've run suggests they are, then we're looking at evidence of advanced Homo Sapiens civilization, tens of thousands of years before mainstream archaeology suggests it was possible." The bone fragments and carved stones she'd brought from the hidden chamber seemed to pulse with ancient energy under the fluorescent lights. Each piece had been carefully catalogued, photographed, and analyzed, yet they raised more questions than they answered. "The craftsmanship is extraordinary," Dr. Martinez continued, lifting a delicately carved piece of ivory. "These tool marks, the precision of the engravings, this represents a level of sophistication that challenges our entire understanding of prehistoric human development." Sarah's phone buzzed insistently in her pocket. Another unknown number. She'd been receiving calls constantly since leaving the hut 2 days ago, each one more threatening than the last. Someone knew what she'd found, and they wanted it badly enough to track her across 3 states. "Dr. Martinez, I need to ask you something," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who else knows about these artifacts? Who have you told?" The professor's expression shifted, becoming guarded. "Only my immediate research team. 3 graduate students and my colleague, Dr. Brennan." Why? Is something wrong? Before Sarah could answer, her phone rang again. This time she recognized the number, her sister's school. Her blood ran cold as she answered. "Miss Chen, this is Principal Roberts. I'm calling about Emma. 2 men came by today asking questions about her, claiming to be family friends. Our security protocols prevented any contact, but I thought you should know." Sarah's world tilted. They weren't just coming for her anymore. They were targeting Emma. She ended the call abruptly and stood, gathering the artifacts with shaking hands. "I have to go," she said, stuffing the pieces into her bag despite Dr. Martinez's protests. "Don't share this research with anyone else. Don't publish anything. People are going to come looking for these items, and they're dangerous." The professor grabbed her wrist gently. "Sarah, wait. There's something else you need to see." He led her to his computer and pulled up a series of satellite images. "I ran the coordinates you gave me for your property through some geological databases. Look at this underground survey data." The screen showed a complex network of chambers and tunnels extending far beyond the small cellar she'd discovered. The hidden room was just the beginning. Beneath her land lay what appeared to be an entire underground complex. Based on the mineral deposits and soil analysis, this structure could be as old as the artifacts themselves. "Sarah, I think you may have inherited more than just a hut. This could be an intact prehistoric settlement." Sarah stared at the images, her mind reeling. The fortune she'd found was nothing compared to the archaeological significance of what lay beneath her feet. But with that significance came danger she was only beginning to understand. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "We know where you are. We know where your sister is. Return what you've taken and no one gets hurt. I have to leave. Now." Sarah's voice carried an edge of panic as she shouldered her bag and headed for the door. Dr. Martinez called after her. "Sarah, you can't handle this alone. If what you're suggesting is true, you need protection. The university has connections with federal agencies." Sarah turned back, her eyes fierce with determination. "The moment we involve the government or law enforcement, this becomes bigger than just me and Emma. There are people willing to kill for what I've found. I won't put anyone else at risk." She paused at the doorway, looking back at the professor who had inadvertently become part of her dangerous secret. "Destroy your research. Delete everything. Forget you ever saw those artifacts." "Sarah, you can't ask me to." "I can, and I am. Promise me." Dr. Martinez studied her face, seeing the genuine terror there, the desperate love of a mother protecting her child. Slowly, he nodded. "I promise." Sarah stepped into the hallway, her mind already calculating routes and distances. She had to get back to Emma, had to keep her safe while figuring out what to do with the earth-shattering secret buried beneath her inherited land. Behind her, Dr. Martinez stared at his computer screen, the image of the underground complex still glowing. Even as he reached for the delete key, he couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah Chen had just walked away carrying the key to rewriting human history, and that powerful forces would stop at nothing to take it from her. The abandoned warehouse loomed against the grey dawn sky like a monument to decay. Sarah clutched the leather journal tighter as Marcus parked behind a rusted shipping container, the engine's tick echoing in the sudden silence. She hadn't slept during the drive from the cave, her mind churning through Dr. Whitmore's revelations about the genetic markers and what they meant for humanity's understanding of itself. "You sure about this place?" Marcus asked, scanning the industrial wasteland around them. Sarah checked her phone. The message from her contact had been cryptic but clear. Pier 47, Warehouse 12. "Come alone. Trust no one else." She'd ignored the last part. After everything they'd been through, she wasn't leaving Marcus behind. Elena said she had connections in the archaeological black market, people who could help us understand what we're dealing with. Sarah stepped out of the car, gravel crunching under her feet. "And maybe find out who else knows about the genetic data." The warehouse door hung ajar, darkness yawning beyond. Sarah's pulse quickened as they approached. The familiar weight of fear settled in her stomach, but she pushed forward. Emma's safety depended on understanding the full scope of what they'd inherited. Inside, shafts of morning light cut through grimy windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like ancient spirits. Their footsteps echoed in the cavernous space until a voice called out from the shadows. Sarah Chen. A woman emerged from behind a stack of shipping crates, tall, silver-haired, wearing expensive boots that seemed out of place in the derelict setting. Her eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone accustomed to dangerous secrets. Dr. Victoria Cross, the woman introduced herself. Elena told me you've stumbled into something extraordinary. Sarah studied her carefully. Depends on your definition of extraordinary. Dr. Cross smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. May I see the journal? Sarah hesitated, then handed it over. Cross opened it with reverent care, her expression shifting as she absorbed the contents. When she reached the genetic analysis pages, she went completely still. Dear God, Cross whispered. This changes everything we thought we knew about human evolution. What exactly are we looking at? Marcus stepped closer, his protective instincts clearly triggered by Cross's intensity. Cross looked up, her face pale. Evidence of a hybrid population that should be impossible. Modern humans didn't just replace Neanderthals, they created something new with them, something that was deliberately hidden from the archaeological record. Hidden by whom? That's the trillion-dollar question. Cross closed the journal carefully. But I know someone who might have answers. Professor Heinrich Volkov. He's been tracking anomalous genetic data for decades, convinced there was a conspiracy to suppress certain discoveries about human origins. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the warehouse's temperature. Where is he? That's the problem. He disappeared 3 weeks ago, right after publishing a paper about unusual DNA markers found in ancient European sites. Cross's expression darkened. The same markers described in this journal. Marcus grabbed Sarah's arm. We need to go. Now. But before they could move, the warehouse filled with the sound of approaching vehicles, multiple engines moving fast. Sarah's heart hammered as she recognized the tactical coordination of the sounds. This wasn't a coincidence. Back exit? Marcus demanded. Cross was already moving, leading them deeper into the warehouse. This way. They ran between towering stacks of cargo containers as the main doors burst open behind them. Shouts echoed through the space, professional and controlled. Sarah caught a glimpse of black tactical gear before Cross yanked her around a corner. How did they find us? Sarah gasped. Your phone, Cross hissed. Elena warned me they might be tracking you. They reached a service door, just as spotlights blazed to life behind them, cutting through the warehouse gloom like searchlights hunting prey. Sarah threw herself through the exit, Marcus and Cross close behind. Outside, a speedboat waited at a decrepit pier, its engine already running. A young man with Elena's eyes waved them forward urgently. My nephew Carlos, Cross explained as they ran. Elena's contingency plan. They leaped into the boat as armed figures emerged from the warehouse. The engine roared to life, and they shot across the harbor's choppy waters. Sarah looked back to see their pursuers reaching the pier's edge, too late to follow. Where are we going? She shouted over the engine noise. Cross pulled out a satellite phone to find Professor Volkov. Elena tracked his last known location before she went underground. She began dialing. He was investigating a site in the Scottish highlands, ancient stone circles that showed the same genetic anomalies. Sarah felt the pieces clicking into place with terrible clarity. The stone hut, the genetic data, the fortune hidden beneath. It was all connected to a much larger conspiracy. Someone had been hiding humanity's true evolutionary history for generations, and now people were dying to keep that secret buried. As the Scottish coastline appeared on the horizon, Sarah realized they weren't just running anymore. They were walking into the heart of whatever ancient mystery had killed her great-aunt and put Emma in danger. The warehouse smelled of rust and decay, its broken windows casting fractured moonlight across the concrete floor. Sarah pressed herself against a support beam, clutching the leather journal to her chest while Marcus checked the perimeter. Every shadow seemed to hold danger, every distant sound a potential threat. "We can't stay here long," Marcus whispered, returning to her side. "Donovan's people will canvass every abandoned building in the city." Sarah nodded, though her mind was elsewhere, lost in the implications of what she'd read. The journal entries painted a picture so extraordinary it defied belief. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Dr. Helena Voss hadn't just discovered early Homo sapiens artifacts. She'd found proof that human civilization was far older than anyone imagined. "Listen to this," Sarah said, opening the journal to a page marked with a dried leaf. June 15th, 1987. "The carbon dating results confirm my worst fears. The metalwork predates known Bronze Age technology by 12,000 years. The mathematical calculations carved into the stone tablets suggest astronomical knowledge that rivals our modern understanding. Either our entire timeline of human development is wrong, or we're dealing with something else entirely." Marcus frowned. "Something else?" Sarah flipped several pages ahead. "Here. The skull fragments show clear Homo sapiens characteristics, but the brain capacity measurements are unprecedented. Dr. Reeves refuses to acknowledge the implications, but I can no longer ignore what the evidence suggests. We weren't the first advanced human civilization on this planet." A car engine echoed from somewhere outside, growing louder. Marcus moved to the window, peering through a gap in the boarded-up frame. Black SUV. "Could be coincidence." Sarah's phone buzzed. "A text from an unknown number. We know you're in Sector 7. Return what belongs to us, and your daughter remains safe." Her blood turned to ice. "They have Emma." "What?" Marcus spun around. Sarah showed him the message with trembling hands. "Oh God, I should never have involved her in this. I should have—" "Stop!" Marcus gripped her shoulders. "Panic won't help Emma. We need to think strategically." Another text arrived, Warehouse District. "You have 1 hour. It's a trap," Marcus said. "The moment you show up with that journal, they'll kill you both." Sarah stared at the phone screen, her mother's instincts warring with her rational mind. Everything she'd learned about her great-aunt, about the ancient civilization, about the staggering implications for human history, none of it mattered if Emma was in danger. "There has to be another way," she said, more to herself than to Marcus. The car engine had stopped. Footsteps crunched on gravel outside. Marcus grabbed her hand. "Back exit! Now!" They moved through the warehouse's maze of abandoned equipment and storage containers. Sarah's mind raced as they navigated the shadows. The journal contained more than historical revelations. Helena's later entries described the location of additional sites, a network of ancient settlements that stretched across continents. The monetary value was incalculable, but the knowledge itself was revolutionary. "Wait." Sarah stopped suddenly. "The journal isn't the only copy." "What do you mean?" Helena was paranoid. "Look." She pointed to an entry dated months before her death. "I've hidden backup copies of my research in 3 locations. If something happens to me, the truth must survive. The safety deposit box in Geneva contains the complete archaeological survey. The university archives hold the photographic evidence. And the stone hut itself. There's something I haven't told anyone." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Haven't told anyone what?" Sarah flipped to the final pages, scanning Helena's increasingly frantic handwriting. She carved the most important information directly into the cellar walls, hidden behind a false stone panel. Mathematical proofs, star charts, DNA analysis results, everything needed to validate her discoveries. A beam of light swept across the warehouse windows, multiple flashlights, moving with military precision. "They're surrounding the building," Marcus breathed. Sarah's phone buzzed again. This time it was a video message. Her heart lurched as she saw Emma tied to a chair in what looked like an office building, tears streaming down her face. A man's voice spoke from off-camera. 45 minutes, Miss Chen. Don't test our patience." "I have to go to them," Sarah said. "No." You go there, you're both dead. Marcus was already moving toward the rear of the warehouse. But if the real evidence is back at the hut, what are you thinking? We give them what they want, or what they think they want. The journal's valuable, but it's not the complete picture. Meanwhile, we make sure the full truth gets out. Sarah understood. A trade, but not the trade they're expecting. The flashlight beams were getting closer. Soon they'd be forced to make a choice that would determine not just Emma's fate, but the future of human understanding itself. Sarah took one last look at her great-aunt's journal, then made her decision. The GPS led them down increasingly narrow roads until they were driving through what felt like the middle of nowhere. Sarah gripped the steering wheel tighter as the pavement gave way to gravel, then dirt. Ancient oak trees pressed close on either side, their branches creating a tunnel of green that blocked most of the afternoon sun. "Are you sure this is right?" Marcus asked from the passenger seat, studying the coordinates Dr. Chen had given them. "The GPS says we're almost there." Sarah's voice was steadier than she felt. In the back seat, Emma had fallen asleep again, exhausted from their hurried departure from the hotel. The fever had broken, but Sarah could see the toll this ordeal was taking on her daughter. They rounded a bend, and suddenly the trees opened into a clearing. Sarah hit the brakes, staring at what lay before them. It wasn't another stone hut like hers. This was something far more elaborate. Ancient stone foundations formed concentric circles, with newer archaeological equipment scattered throughout. Tarps covered excavation sites, and a small research trailer sat at the edge of the dig. "My God," Marcus breathed. "It's massive." Dr. Chen emerged from the trailer, waving them over. Sarah parked near a cluster of other vehicles and gently shook Emma awake. "We're here, sweetheart." Chen approached with quick, urgent steps. "You made good time. We need to move fast. I've been monitoring communications, and there's increased chatter about this location." "What is this place?" Sarah asked, helping Emma out of the car. "One of 7 sites we've identified across Europe. Each one represents a different phase of early human development, but this one," Chen gestured toward the stone circles, "this one is the oldest. We believe it's where they first discovered how to create the gold." They followed her toward the excavation. Sarah could see now that the stone foundations weren't random. They formed a precise pattern with channels carved between them that looked almost like a circuit board made of rock. The process was incredibly complex, Chen explained as they walked. It required specific mineral compositions in the water, exact temperature controls, and what we can only describe as primitive but sophisticated chemistry. They weren't just lucky, they were brilliant. Emma tugged on Sarah's hand, pointing to something glinting in one of the excavated areas. "Mom, look!" Sarah's breath caught. Embedded in the ancient stone was a vein of the same strange gold they'd found in her hut cellar. But here, she could see how it had been formed, layers of different materials, compressed and heated over time through a process she couldn't begin to understand. "How many people know about this?" Marcus asked. "Too many," Chen admitted. "The consortium has been trying to acquire this land for months. So far, the local government has protected it as an archaeological site, but with the kind of pressure they can bring to bear," a distant rumble made them all look up. Through the trees, Sarah could see dust clouds rising from the access road. "That's them," Chen said grimly. "I was hoping we'd have more time. What do we do?" Sarah's mind raced. They were exposed here, nowhere to hide. Chen was already moving toward the trailer. "There's something you need to see first, something that changes everything we thought we knew about your inheritance." Inside the trailer, computers displayed detailed scans and analysis reports. Chen pulled up a 3-dimensional model that made Sarah's heart skip a beat. It was her hut, mapped down to every stone. "We've been studying your site remotely using ground-penetrating radar," Chen explained quickly. "What you found in the cellar isn't just a storage room, it's a laboratory, and the gold there isn't finished product. It's raw material." "Raw material for what?" Marcus demanded. "For this." Chen pointed to another scan, this one showing a chamber they hadn't found yet, deeper than the cellar. accessible through what looked like a hidden passage. Your great-aunt didn't just inherit the secret of making gold. She inherited the responsibility of protecting something far more valuable. The rumble of vehicles was getting closer. Sarah could hear car doors slamming, voices shouting orders. "We have to go," she said, gathering Emma closer. "There's a back trail through the woods," Chen said, grabbing a backpack filled with research files. "But Sarah, you need to understand. Whatever's in that hidden chamber, people have died to keep it secret for thousands of years. Your great-aunt was the last guardian, and now it's my turn," Sarah finished, the weight of understanding settling over her like a shroud. They slipped out the trailer's back door just as armed figures emerged from the tree line. Sarah caught a glimpse of expensive suits and military-grade equipment before Chen led them into the deeper woods. Behind them, she could hear the systematic destruction of the dig site beginning. As they fled through the ancient trees, Sarah realized that inheriting the hut hadn't just given her a fortune. It had made her the keeper of humanity's most dangerous secret. The helicopter's rotors thundered overhead as Sarah pressed herself against the ancient stone wall, clutching the ceramic tablet to her chest. Marcus crouched beside her. His breathing labored from their desperate sprint through the forest. The beam of a searchlight swept across the clearing where the hut stood, its harsh white glare transforming the peaceful meadow into something sinister. "They found us faster than I expected," Marcus whispered, wiping blood from a cut on his forehead. "Kellerman must have more resources than we thought." Sarah's mind raced. The tablet felt warm against her ribs, as if the ancient symbols carved into its surface were somehow alive. The translation Marcus had completed before their hurried escape still echoed in her mind. Coordinates to 3 other sites, locations where the original tribe had hidden additional evidence of their discovery. Evidence that could prove human civilization was far older and more advanced than anyone had imagined. The helicopter circled once more before landing in the clearing. Sarah watched through a gap in the stones as armed figures emerged, their movements coordinated and professional. Kellerman stepped out last, his expensive suit incongruous against the primitive backdrop of the hut. Even from this distance, she could see his face was rigid with determination. "We need to move," Marcus urged. "There's an old deer path about 50 yards north. If we can reach it without being seen—" A voice boomed across the clearing, amplified by a megaphone. "Sarah Chen, I know you're out there. You have something that belongs to me, something worth far more than you understand. Let's discuss this like civilized people." Sarah almost laughed at the irony. Civilized people didn't hire mercenaries or murder innocent researchers. She thought of Dr. Reeves, whose only crime had been curiosity about the past, and her resolve hardened. "I'm not giving him the tablet," she whispered fiercely. "This information belongs to humanity, not to some corporate sociopath who wants to bury it." Marcus nodded grimly. "Then we need to get to one of those coordinates. If we can find more evidence, document it properly, we might be able to expose this whole conspiracy before—" The crack of a rifle interrupted him. Chips of stone exploded from the wall above their heads, and Sarah realized one of Kellerman's men had spotted their hiding place. She grabbed Marcus's hand and they ran, abandoning stealth for speed as shouts erupted behind them. The forest seemed to close around them as they plunged deeper into the woods. Branches tore at Sarah's clothes and scratched her face, but she didn't slow down. Behind them she could hear heavy footsteps crashing through the underbrush, getting closer. Marcus suddenly veered left, leading her down a steep embankment toward the sound of running water. "The stream," he gasped. "If we follow it downstream, we might lose them." They splashed into the icy water, the shock of it stealing Sarah's breath. The current was stronger than it looked, threatening to sweep her feet out from under her with each step. But the water would hide their tracks, and the sound might mask their movement. For 20 minutes they struggled downstream, the pursuit seeming to fade behind them. Sarah's legs were numb with cold when Marcus finally guided her to the opposite bank, pulling her up behind a fallen log. "There's something I didn't tell you about those coordinates," he said quietly, checking to make sure they hadn't been followed. One of them isn't just another hiding place. According to the tablet, it's where they buried their most precious possession, something they called the first truth. Sarah stared at him. You think it's more tablets? Maybe, or maybe something else entirely. But Sarah, the location, it's less than 10 miles from here. There's a limestone cave system in the hills. If the coordinates are accurate, we could reach it before dawn. She closed her eyes, exhaustion washing over her. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to take Emma and disappear somewhere Kellerman would never find them. But she thought about the tablet's implications, evidence that human beings had achieved sophisticated understanding of astronomy and mathematics thousands of years earlier than believed. Knowledge that had been deliberately suppressed, hidden away by people who feared what it might mean. If we go to this cave, if we find whatever's there, what then? Kellerman isn't going to just give up. He's already killed people to keep this secret. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, listening to the water flow past them in the darkness. Then we make sure the secret gets out before he can stop us. We document everything, upload it everywhere. Scientific journals, news media, social networks. Make it impossible to suppress. The sound of helicopters rose in the distance again, searching. Sarah pulled the tablet from her jacket and traced one of the carved symbols with her finger. Somewhere out there was the truth her ancestors had died to preserve, and somewhere else her daughter was waiting for her to come home. She looked at Marcus and nodded. "Show me the way to the cave." Sarah pressed her back against the cold stone wall of the hut, her heart hammering as footsteps crunched through the undergrowth outside. Through the narrow window, she could see flashlight beams cutting through the darkness like predatory eyes. Marcus Chen had found them. "How many?" Dr. Kellerman whispered, his aged hands trembling as he clutched the leather satchel containing the ancient DNA samples. "At least 4, Sarah breathed back, watching the lights move in coordinated patterns around the perimeter. "They're surrounding us." The irony wasn't lost on her. Hiding in humanity's oldest known dwelling while being hunted by those who would destroy the evidence of their own origins. The stone walls that had protected her ancestors 40,000 years ago were now her only shield against Chen's corporate killers. A sharp crack echoed through the night as someone stepped on a branch near the entrance. Sarah's grip tightened on the ceramic fragment she'd grabbed from the cellar, the one piece of evidence small enough to conceal but significant enough to prove everything. The fragment bore microscopic traces of the genetic material that would rewrite textbooks and topple industries. "Sarah Mitchell!" Chen's voice boomed from outside, amplified by a megaphone. "I know you're in there. You have something that belongs to me, belongs to him." Kellerman's whisper carried decades of academic outrage. That material belongs to all of humanity. Sarah closed her eyes, thinking of Emma safe with her sister 300 miles away. At least her daughter was out of this nightmare. But the weight of what they'd discovered pressed down on her like the earth above an archaeological dig. The DNA evidence didn't just prove the hut's age. It revealed genetic markers that showed early Homo Sapiens had possessed cognitive abilities far beyond what mainstream science accepted. Abilities that, if replicated through modern genetic engineering, would give Chen's biotech empire godlike power. "You're outnumbered and outgunned," Chen continued, "but I'm a reasonable man. Walk out now with the samples, and I'll let you live. Your daughter needs her mother." The mention of Emma sent ice through Sarah's veins. Chen's message was clear. He knew where to find them if she refused. "The back entrance," Kellerman whispered urgently. "The one your great-aunt used for her smuggling operations." Sarah had almost forgotten about the concealed opening behind the false wall. During World War II, Aunt Miriam had used it to move refugees through the underground network. The passage connected to natural caves that honeycombed the hillside. "Can you make it?" Sarah asked, studying the professor's pale face in the moonlight filtering through the ancient window. "At my age, what's the alternative?" They crept toward the rear wall, where Sarah's fingers found the hidden mechanism Miriam had shown her in old photographs. The stone panels slid aside with barely a whisper, revealing the narrow tunnel beyond. 30 seconds! Chen's voice had lost its patience. Then we come in shooting. Sarah helped Kellerman through the opening first, then squeezed in after him, pulling the panel closed just as the front door exploded inward. Boots thundered across the floor above as they crawled through the cramped passage, following the route Miriam had mapped out decades ago. The tunnel opened into a limestone cavern where underground springs had carved cathedral-like chambers from living rock. Sarah switched on her phone's flashlight, keeping the beam low as they navigated between stalagmites toward what she hoped was still a viable exit. The geological survey, Kellerman panted as they moved. That's how Chen found the site so quickly. His company had been monitoring unusual mineral deposits in this area for months. Looking for what? Rare earth elements for his biotech research. But when the survey revealed the hut's true age and the genetic material in the soil, Kellerman's voice trailed off as distant shouts echoed through the cave system. Chen's men had found the tunnel. They picked up the pace, following Miriam's route through chambers that had hidden resistance fighters and refugees 70 years ago. The cave network was extensive, but Sarah knew Chen's resources were extensive too. Thermal imaging, ground-penetrating radar, helicopter surveillance. He had access to military-grade equipment through his government contracts. The exit appeared as a crack of starlight ahead, partially concealed by overgrown brambles. Sarah pushed through first, emerging onto a hillside half a mile from the hut. Below them, the lights of Chen's search team moved like fireflies through the darkness. "My car," Sarah whispered, pointing to where she'd hidden her vehicle in a grove of oak trees. "If we can reach it." The crack of a rifle split the night, and bark exploded from the tree beside her head. On the hillside below, a figure with night vision scope had found them. "Run," Kellerman urged, pressing the satchel into her hands. "The world needs to know the truth." Another shot rang out as Sarah sprinted toward the car, the weight of human history clutched against her chest, and Chen's killers closing in from all sides. The helicopter's rotors thundered overhead as Sarah pressed herself against the cold stone wall of the hut, clutching the leather journal to her chest. Through the narrow window, she watched armed figures rappel down into the clearing, their tactical gear gleaming in the afternoon sun. Dr. Chen had been right. They'd found her. "The back entrance," Marcus whispered urgently, grabbing her arm. "Through the cellar." They scrambled down the hidden ladder into the ancient chamber below. The golden artifacts seemed to mock them now, their surfaces reflecting the harsh beam of Marcus's flashlight as they navigated between the carefully arranged displays. Sarah's mind raced with the weight of what she'd learned from the journal. Humanity's true origins, the genetic experiments that had created their species, the bloodlines that certain families would kill to protect. The sound of boots stomping across the floor above made them both freeze. Voices filtered down through the stone, clipped and professional. "Sweep every inch. The woman has the documentation." "What about the site itself? Should we—" "Our orders are clear. Secure the evidence, eliminate the witnesses, then we sanitize everything." Sarah's blood turned to ice. They weren't just here for the journal or the artifacts. They were here to bury the truth permanently, along with anyone who'd seen it. Marcus led her to a section of the back wall where loose stones formed a natural passage. "This connects to the old mine shafts," he breathed in her ear. "I explored them yesterday while you were reading." As they squeezed through the narrow opening, Sarah heard the cellar ladder creaking under someone's weight. A powerful flashlight beam swept across the chamber, illuminating the golden treasures that had sat hidden for millennia. The mine shaft beyond was pitch black and smelled of damp earth and ancient decay. Sarah fought down her claustrophobia as they crawled through the tunnel, Marcus's light showing the way ahead. Behind them, angry voices echoed from the cellar. "Sir, there's a passage back here. They're in the tunnels. Send Alpha Team around to the mine entrance. We'll flush them out." The tunnel forked ahead, and Marcus hesitated. "I only mapped the main passages," he admitted. "We're in uncharted territory now." Sarah closed her eyes, trying to remember something from the journal. a reference to multiple escape routes built by the original inhabitants. "Left," she said with sudden certainty. "The journal mentioned water. There should be an underground stream this way." They took the left passage, and within minutes Sarah could hear the distant sound of running water. The tunnel began to slope downward, and soon they were splashing through a shallow stream that reflected their flashlight beam like black glass. The water led them to a wider cavern where multiple passages converged. Sarah pulled out the journal, frantically scanning the ancient text by flashlight. The writing was in the same strange script she'd been deciphering, but now the symbols seemed to flow more naturally in her mind, as if some genetic memory was awakening. "There," she pointed to a passage that angled sharply upward. "That should bring us out near the main road, beyond the tree line." Behind them, lights began to flicker in the tunnel they'd just left. Their pursuers were gaining ground. They climbed through the ascending passage, their hands and knees scraping against rough stone. Sarah's lungs burned, but the journal's weight in her backpack drove her forward. This wasn't just about her survival anymore. It was about preserving truth that could change everything humanity thought it knew about itself. The passage opened into another chamber, this one with a shaft of natural light streaming down from above. Looking up, Sarah could see blue sky through a crack in the earth barely wide enough for a person. "Can you boost me up?" she asked Marcus. He interlaced his fingers, creating a step. "What about the journal? Even if you get out, they'll hunt you to the ends of the earth for that information." Sarah paused, one foot in his hands. He was right. As long as she carried the journal, she'd never be safe. But destroying it meant losing the truth forever. Then she remembered Dr. Chen's words about verification, about the need for multiple sources. "The artifacts," she said suddenly. "We documented them with photos. The journal is just one piece of evidence." She reached into her backpack and pulled out her phone, quickly uploading everything to 3 different cloud storage accounts. Then she tore out 2 crucial pages from the journal, the ones that identified the modern bloodlines and their connection to the ancient experiments. "I'm keeping these." She folded the pages into her jacket pocket. "But the rest?" She handed Marcus the journal. "Hide this somewhere in the tunnels, somewhere they'll never think to look. If something happens to me, at least the truth will survive." Above them, the sound of approaching helicopters grew louder. Their window of escape was closing fast. The dawn light filtered through the trees as Sarah stood at the edge of the ancient settlement, her breath visible in the cool morning air. The fortune sat in reinforced cases behind her, $40 million that had cost so much blood to protect. Marcus checked his watch while Elena finished uploading the last of the genetic data to servers across 3 continents. "The documentary crew will be here in 2 hours, Elena said, closing her laptop. "Once this goes public, there's no turning back." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of what they were about to unleash. The DNA evidence would prove that modern humans had developed complex civilization 40,000 years earlier than anyone believed. The implications would shatter academic careers, rewrite textbooks, and force humanity to reconsider everything they thought they knew about their own origins. "Dr. Chen won't give up," Marcus warned, scanning the tree line. "Even after yesterday, he still has resources." They'd barely escaped the underground chamber when Chen's remaining mercenaries had arrived. The explosion that sealed the tunnel had trapped half his team inside, but Chen himself had vanished into the wilderness. Sarah touched the flash drive in her pocket, the one containing coordinates to 6 other sites around the world where similar evidence might be found. "Let him come," Sarah said. "The truth is bigger than his corporation now." A rustling in the bushes made them all freeze. Marcus drew his weapon, but Dr. Hassan emerged with his hands raised, looking haggard and defeated. "I'm not here to fight," he said quietly. "I came to warn you. Chen isn't finished. He's contacted buyers in Beijing and Moscow, governments who would pay billions to suppress this information." Elena stepped forward. "Why should we trust you? You led those killers right to us." Hassan's shoulders sagged. "Because I've spent my entire career searching for evidence like this, and I let greed blind me to its true value. This discovery belongs to humanity, not to the highest bidder." Sarah studied the archaeologist's face, seeing genuine remorse there. "What do you want?" "To help you protect it. I know Chen's methods, his contacts. There's a private military contractor flying in from Prague. They'll be here before noon." Marcus cursed under his breath. "We need to move the artifacts now." "No," Sarah said firmly. "We make our stand here. This is where it all started, where my great-aunt spent her life protecting something she probably never fully understood. If we run now, we'll spend forever looking over our shoulders." She turned to address all of them. 60 hours ago, I was a broke single mother facing eviction. I thought this inheritance might pay my bills. I never imagined it would change everything I believed about human history." The sound of approaching helicopters echoed across the valley. Elena grabbed her equipment while Marcus checked his ammunition. Hassan picked up a fallen branch, testing its weight as an improvised weapon. "The documentary crew?" Sarah asked. Marcus shook his head, pointing to the black military helicopters emerging from the cloud cover. "Those aren't journalists." Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Dr. Chen's number appeared on the screen. Against Marcus's protest, she answered. "Ms. Mitchell." Chen's cultured voice carried clearly over the helicopter noise. "You have something that belongs to my clients. I'm prepared to offer you $50 million to walk away." "It doesn't belong to your clients," Sarah replied. "It belongs to everyone. You're protecting fairy tales and old bones. I'm offering you and your daughter a lifetime of security." The mention of Emma sent ice through Sarah's veins. "If you've touched her, she's perfectly safe at school, completely unaware that her mother is about to make a very poor decision. But my associates in various cities can reach many places very quickly." Sarah looked at Marcus, who was frantically trying to establish radio contact with local authorities. Elena had her satellite phone out, presumably calling the documentary crew. Hassan stood guard, watching the helicopters circle like vultures. "You have 5 minutes to decide," Chen continued. "Walk away with 50 million, or watch everything you love burn." Sarah ended the call and turned to face her unlikely allies. "He's threatening Emma." "The local police are 30 minutes out," Marcus reported. "The documentary crew is 20 minutes behind them. And Chen's people will be on the ground in 3 minutes, Elena added, watching the helicopters descend. Sarah closed her eyes, thinking of her daughter's face, her bright smile, her endless questions about the world. Then she thought about all the children who would grow up never knowing the true scope of human achievement, never understanding how far their ancestors had really come. She opened her eyes with new resolve. "Then we hold them off for 21 minutes. The first helicopter touched down at the far end of the clearing, and armed figures began spilling out. Sarah gripped the ancient spear point she'd taken from the hut, a weapon crafted by human hands 40 millennia ago, when survival meant standing your ground against impossible odds. Some things, she realized, never changed.